Quentin Tarantino wrote a book about a movie, his movie, that's also about the movie business, and it's kind of awesome. So I know what you're thinking, oh, loyal viewer of mine. You're thinking, magnificent one, you magnanimous mountain of malignant mischief. What are you doing reading a book without pictures? Aren't you just the guy who draws pretty pictures, hot girls, and reads those comic books? And I would say to you, yes. But when it comes to reading literature about hippies, the 1960s, and the general movie business of the Western time, I tend to take a little bit of interest into fitting my nose into something other than a comic book. So what is this book about? Well, it's about these guys, Rick and Cliff, who are basically a two-man duo, one being a Hollywood movie star, that's Mr. Rick Dalton there on your right, and Cliff Booth, his trusty sidekick slash stuntman slash the guy who drives him around because he lost his license. Now, what this book is, just like the movie, it's a love story about the movie business itself. Because as it kind of talks about an aging Rick Dalton and a very indifferent yet authentic Cliff Booth, it really takes a behind the scene look at the actors, the stuntmen, the producers, the overall Hollywood scene of the time. You know, the book itself is a little bit different from the movie because the movie has a plot. Essentially, what's going to happen is at the beginning of that movie, you get the story, you get the background of these characters. There's a little bit of a delve into the set of Lancer, the movie that Rick Dalton, the series that Rick Dalton's working on as the quote-unquote heavy. And then you also see Cliff Booth kind of having an encounter with a bunch of hippies who would later turn out to be the Manson murderers. Now, that story actually has a kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end, and comes to a conclusion with a big show off with the hippies. The book is different because it doesn't really tell a plot. It actually just explores the characters in a much more in-depth level. So in that sense, you don't have a complete arc like you do in the movie. So if you read this book by itself, good luck, because it's just going to be the most random stuff you've ever seen or read, and it's not going to really satisfy you. However, it does tell a different side of these guys. You see, whereas the movie might emphasize certain things, the book will go into other things much more in depth. For example, that hippie killing scene at the end of the movie, well, it's really just about a paragraph and a half in one of the chapters. Instead, what you'll find is the story behind Pussycat. You will find the story behind Charlie and his struggles to make it into the music industry. But perhaps the greatest thing about this book is the fact that it focuses on Cliff Booth's background. So when you look at the movie, what you see is you see a guy who's kind of a cool guy. He's indifferent. He's a stuntman. He's probably a wife killer. In the book, you actually see some of that, but you also see kind of the fact that he's a war hero. He's also a bit of a psychotic murderer who gets away with murder many times throughout his life. And he's also probably a wife killer. So it's interesting, but it tells not only the background of what he did in World War II, but also his life leading up to the point of where he is and how he ended up becoming Rick Dalton stuntman. I mean, if I told you that he once considered becoming a pimp in France, you'd look at me kind of funny. But, in fact, it's true. Now, the other thing about Cliff is you realize he's actually quite a bit of an intellect. While I wouldn't use the word snob, Cliff actually has a lot of thoughts and likes to really take an interest in foreign films, for example. You know, he has a kind of a love for Akira Kurosawa, who is the Japanese filmmaker, which I think Quentin Tarantino is actually using a callback to one of his idols in the spaghetti westerns, as he kind of uses those, because when you look back at kind of the original trilogy of A Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, there basically were elements of Akira Kurosawa's Japanese films in there as well. So Sergio Leone was the director there that took a lot of those elements. So that kind of, I think what he's doing is he's using the character of Cliff to show his thoughts on them, how he feels about the movies itself as well. The thing about Cliff too is you really get this sense that he is a person who is at any moment in time willing to do whatever the hell he wants to do. Whether that's murdering one of his friends, whether that's murdering two mobsters in Chicago, it doesn't matter. Nothing phases this guy, right? And he gets away with a lot of stuff. Now, as we go to the other side of the tale, you've got Rick Dalton. Now, similar to the movie, he is an over-the-hill actor. What this book does, though, it does, like I said, it goes into sort of him as a person. And what you realize is an interesting thing about Rick is he's got a disgust for all of the things that I think he fears he might be. What I mean by that is he's kind of an aging drunk, but he has a disgust for aging drunk actors. It's also kind of neat because you see where he ends up a little bit later on, a little bit beyond what's in the movie. So you do get a bit of a future take and an age. And you also get to have an interesting take on some minor characters. Like, that little girl in the movie who plays, the hostage gets taken from I think the Lancer brothers. It's their sister. She actually ends up being nominated for Oscars, and she ends up being kind of a big movie star, and doesn't just kind of disappear at 16 like Rick Dalton thinks she will. One of the most interesting parts about this too is when you look at the movie, a lot of people had issues with the Bruce Lee scene and the fact that Cliff Booth was able to kind of kick his ass or at least hold his own with him. The book does a much better job explaining what actually happens. Essentially what happens is he goes, "Hey Bruce, try to kick me." And Bruce does, kicks him and knocks him down. And then he goes, "Hey, try and kick me again. Use that same move." He doesn't actually say that, but he gets it to the point where he makes Bruce think he's going to get to do the same thing over again exactly, and he then utilizes the exact same move to throw him into a car. But it explains kind of the psychology behind it, so it's a little bit interesting. It also shows you where he's coming from. The guy's killed 18 people with his bare hands, or maybe not with his bare hands, but he's killed 18 people with a knife, I think, right? And so his mentality is a little bit different, and he definitely knows how to fight. So, and again, it's a fictional piece of work, so he can do whatever he wants. But one of the best parts about the book, though, is it really delves between the reality of the characters and the movie sets. So for instance, when he's acting on the set of Lancer, in the book, it really draws you into that episode. So you actually are in this situation where throughout the story itself, you're reading the story of that first episode. And sometimes for pages and pages, entire chapters at a time, you get these stories of, Johnny and the older brother and, Rick Dalton's character and how they kind of come along and do everything there. So overall, I'd recommend this book. Go ahead and get it. It's worth the read. Hey, if you'd like to see more videos about illustration, reading, movies, or just entertainment in general, feel free to subscribe. You don't have to. Yeah, it's okay. You can go ahead. Go watch another video. I'm fine. I don't need another subscriber, but it'd be nice. If you're willing to just click a button, it'd be kind of cool, but nah, it's okay. You know what? You do you. You do what you want to do. You subscribe. Hey, I'm happy. If not, keep on trucking, man.